What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit. And I'm really, really excited about this episode. I'm so excited because I know the future and I know what we're about to talk about. It's one of those things. And I love this. You're all listening. You're in business. You're entrepreneurs. You're dreaming. You're a visionary. And this is the life of a business owner when you think you got it all figured out and then something happens, right? And so I was literally bragging to John and Danette a couple weeks ago when they sat in the studio and we had a phenomenal 2 hour conversation on the podcast that, you go through these lessons in the studio and all the technology and, it's all the learning lessons. And I'm like, I finally got it dialed in. Everything's going so good. And then the first part of our conversation got hacked due to technology. And so I love people like John and Danette. I always get that pit in my stomach when something wrong happens, and talk to them, and they're like, you know what? Let's come back in the studio and film the intro. And so I've got John and Danette Bell in the studio from Empowering Futures, and we're going to talk about exactly what they do here because I think again it takes some stories for people to go deep and understand it, and it's work that gets me super fired up. It's literally transformational for not just whether you own a business or you're working for a company, but it's transformational for who you are as your whole self. And so without further ado, John and Danette, welcome back to the studio.
Jason, great to be back again.
That's what I do with all my friends. I mess up all their stuff. So then we got to do it over again.
I think it was a divine intervention, man, because we got to come back and talk some more with you and spend time. So that's always a blessing.
And that's what I love about you guys is because you see it that way too. And I'm always like, okay, there's a reason why something happened here. And we get to go even a little bit deeper in the conversation. So it's fun. We left that conversation like we could talk for another 2 hours.
That was pretty good. Yeah. It was really a lot of fun. We enjoy that. Well, we're passionate about what we do too. So it's easy. All you got to do is just ask a question and boom, off we go. Right.
And I had a couple of examples of some things, but so for it, can you explain what's the work that you do?
Absolutely. And so I have to do this all the time is I got to read it because I want to take it and I go too far. And so I'm training myself to be concise. So at Empowering Futures, the name of our company, we help individuals and organizations rewire how they think, how they lead and operate by aligning identity, behavior, and systems through neuroscience-based transformation. How's that?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's all inclusive. It's kind of pulls it all in together. But what the heck does that mean? Yeah. So the part where it says neuroscience-based transformation. So it's neurobehavioral. It's looking at the human as a system, right? We're a system, and we have this brain and this amazing body of all of its parts and pieces, all interconnected and all operates as a system. And the more you understand how this system, specifically looking at the brain, neurologically, how we're constructed, how it operates, the various systems within the system, so subsystems within the brain, that deal with things like our identity, the concept of self, things that work with our reward center, our alert system, that's like the fire alarm within our brain. So all these systems that work together to allow us to carry out our life here and to learn, to love, to laugh, to, struggle and do all these things. And the more we understand about the construct of how we wire this brain and how it begins immediately upon development. Really, quite honestly, it starts in the womb and then all the way up to your current life. The brain doesn't stop forming. There was an old notion, still lingers today, that you get old enough and the brain's hardwired. You can't change it. Well,
can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Well, basically, yeah, that's saying, but yeah, it's not true. And if it did, you'd be dead. That's the bottom line. If your brain actually froze, it would be over for you. So there's always neurogenesis going on. There's things like what's called long-term potentiation. That's the formation of neural connections of the neurons, the cells in your brain. You have 80 billion of them, by the way, that come together to form the neural network of which the encoding takes place. So all your memories, your thoughts, your feelings, your everything encoded in there. So yeah, the more you understand about this thing, it's less of a black box, a mystery, and something that you actually have power over, right? There are some systems that are automated. And that's actually the part that gets us in trouble. But there is a programmer, and it's you, and it's understanding. All right, well, how am I programming this thing, and how do I rewrite the program when it becomes necessary? So
I love it how you break it down into programming, and I something that is like it screams in my head all while you're talking is that like everywhere you go, there you are. People always there's grass is greener on the other side. I'm gonna go get this job. I'm gonna go be in that relationship. I'm gonna go put myself in this circumstance, situation, culture, whatever, and things will be different then. And then people get there and they it's the same story, right? And they a lot of times they don't take that personal responsibility and go introspective and they blame everybody else.
so yeah, we call that it's a state. It's a state of being victim, and it's really prevalent,
Yeah.
unfortunately. They get offended by it, right? They're like, "I'm not a victim." I hate that. I hate victims, and I don't wanna be a victim. But then when you listen to the positioning on a thing, on a matter, right? And you hear, "Yeah, well," we'll just say, "Well, my wife really just makes me so mad," right? Right, I get mad because she does this, this, and this, and that, and it's her fault. Bam, you're in it. That's a symptom. That's a sign. If you hear that coming out of your mouth, right, then that's a flag to say, "Uh-oh, I've slipped into victim." And it's a very powerful construct that holds us because in that mental construct, it's a mindset. Is you're right, and the other person or their situation is wrong. So you get to be right, they get to be wrong, and then you'll justify it, and you'll have your evidence to support the notion, and then you anchor on that position, right? And then insist the other person change. Why? In order to one, agree with you so you can confirm that you're right, but more importantly, because they're the ones making you, let's say, upset. Well, if they just saw it my way, I would no longer be upset. In other words, they would then have the power to go from making me angry to making me happy. Well, just think about that, right? Can anybody really make you feel anything, right? No.
I think the cure, and a lot of people will try to go and find things to fill those things that make them happy or to feel love. But I truly believe you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. If you hate yourself, chances are you're the one that's talking about other people. You're the one that's causing chaos in relationships.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're boy, we're gonna really get into
I know, right? I said 30 minutes. I don't know.
yeah. Can't promise you that. So jump in anytime you're feeling, so motivated. When you're in victim, there's these payoffs that you get of being right, and pointing the finger. And then there's a cost, right? Because what you create when you be victim and you hold a position and you become very rigid, you become myopic in your view of what's possible. It becomes very narrow, right? Focus. And then you start sacrificing connection, right? Affinity, love. There's not a lot of that going on when you are in victim or being victim. But the biggest thing is an avoidance of being responsible. And because you point the finger at the circumstance or the other person, you're saying that they're the cause of the matter, because. We use that word all the time. Oh, because, and we don't think about what it means. Being the cause, be cause. You're saying over there is the cause, not me. So you've given your power away. No longer have power. And that's why you have to sit and convince them to change their mind. And that, because that's in your mind, you're kind of like, you need to get there in order for me to be able to be released from this upsetness that I'm experiencing. So taking back your power, being responsible for what you create, alters the entire frame and then opens you up to be able to hear and see new possibilities, right, in a given situation. It's a very, very life-sucking state of being, right? It does not give life, it takes it away.
It takes it away. Did I tell you the story about my dad and like the forgiveness in the last episode?
I think you
Okay, so and it's the same exact thing. I was living in a victim mentality. It was in my early 20s. Life was just not going good for me in a lot of different ways, financially, relationships. Like I was not feeling good about myself, but I was holding on to a lot of stuff from my childhood. I grew up with a very abusive dad,
Mhm.
and my dad committed suicide at 42. And I was sitting in all the things, just constantly blaming other people, other circumstances, mainly my dad. I wouldn't be in these situations if it wasn't for this way I grew up, right? All these things that are happening. And one day I had this major epiphany of thoughts where I was sitting and I was thinking about, wow, like this guy's dead. And I've got all this anger and hate and I'm blaming him for all this stuff. And can he really make if all of that, like I could sit here and be so angry and focus all my time and hate and energy on this hate, and would that change anything? No, in fact, it's pretty insane to sit and do, right? Like this guy's dead. And even if he meant to do what he did to me, and I think a lot of people are just going through life. And then I really started looking at his life and just really understanding, wow,
That's it.
he I'm not the victim. He was the victim. He didn't realize that he could choose different. He grew up a certain way. He felt like he fell into repeat habits. He created a life, and then he took his own life at 42. And this dead man can't feel my anger. And even if he could, how would it change anything, right? And so that was and I realized like, but I right now have the power to change, create a new life, like reverse my family circumstances to the point where my son or my kids or my family doesn't have to feel that or know that. Not that my son doesn't know where I came from or know my story, but he didn't have to live it or experience it.
Yeah, and that's maturity that you were able to come to a point at some point, overcome that victim statehood for yourself, right? Kind of turn it off and look at it and say, all right, but I'm responsible for the choices I make, right? If I'd keep, wanting to give my dad the poison to drink, but I keep drinking it, you know, it's just it's gonna kill me. Yeah, so that's a lot of maturity, and that's what a lot of I think a lot of people go through that, and they want to blame the parent. And yeah, okay, there are some bad parents, like they're just, they're bad. They're bad at it, right? Are they a bad person? Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't really matter. But a lot of times they're actually just trying to do what they think is best given what they've been given.
Yep.
And if they're modeling, yeah, it wasn't so great to begin with, well, that legacy continues, unfortunately. And they're like you said, living out their ideas, notions, and beliefs out of what they believe about themselves, which was helped to be shaped by the experience they had in their very young life, right? So if they never deal with it, if they never look at that, then that just gets rehearsed. Whatever was created when you were 2, 3,
Mm.
4, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, whatever notions you came up with, whatever beliefs got created, and then you come up with a formula to succeed or overcome or to survive, right? And it may have been kind of adaptive, but not really for the long term. So you create that, it works for the moment, you feel better, but if you never do anything to look at it, which we don't, it gets rehearsed. And so you aren't your bad mistakes or your problems or anything else. That's not you. You are what your brain is what you rehearse. You are something completely different. You're actually whole and complete. You're the programmer, but you're living as if you are the program.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is so important is that that element of choice that you made in that moment when you really were able to see what was going on and then just make, choosing. You have a
Choosing.
path. You have a
Yeah.
path to choose. And we all make choices all day, every day about how it's going to go for us, and we're in charge of how it's going to go for us. Just like the hiccup with this wonderful time to be together again. It's just you choose how you're going to respond to it,
Yep.
right? And it could have been like, I don't have time, blah blah blah. Some crazy story. It's like, no, it's great. It's an opportunity, right?
We're so lucky in the last because the bird wakes up and has a routine. It doesn't say I'm going to start my own business today. I'm gonna change my habits. Like it's nature and they follow rules and they don't have this external thought where they can change where we can.
Yeah, they also don't wake up and say, or come at the end of the day and say, "Boy, I had a bad day."
They
Days.
don't have bad days.
No,
Yeah.
it just is what it is.
How many times you hear people say, such a bad day today because of this thing that
Yeah.
happened early in the morning? It's like 4 o'clock in the
4 o'clock in the
afternoon.
afternoon.
How can it still be a bad day? It's you choose that. Whereas something that you said earlier in the conversation about, changing a career or, moving, whatever the circumstance that you create to think that that's it's going to make you happy. And it's so not true, right? It's like, if I do this, I'll have this and then I'll be happy or whatever that be is. And in our coaching, we reverse that script because like you said, no matter where you go, there you are. And it's really choosing and getting solid in your identity and who you be in the world. You know, how do you
Yeah.
operate? And why are you waiting for something that may or may not happen to be happy or be joyful or be encouraging or, you know, people don't, I don't think they necessarily wake up and say, gee, I really want to be miserable today. But somehow it ends up happening because they don't realize the power that they have. And that's what's so beautiful about bringing neuroscience into the conversation because there's a lot of freedom when you understand the basics of how our brain works. We're not stuck. And it's such good news.
It's such good news. I mean, it makes me think because what you said is so right. Those people don't wake up and say, I want to have a miserable day today. In fact, they would tell you all day long. Those people are the ones that tell you all day long they don't want to feel sick, hurt, pain. They don't want to have a bad day. But it's one of those things that I always feel like the smartest person in the room when I say reticular activating system, because most people don't know what it is. And then John comes in the room and he talks, and I'm like, oh, I know just the tip of the iceberg. So that's always awesome. But like, the reticular activating system, if you're having a bad day, here's an example, right? Several years ago, I was on the way to a meeting, and I was going to be early to this meeting. I was so pumped I was going to give a speech or a talk to one of my teams out in Frankenmuth, and I was going to be early, and the day was great. And I jumped in the car, and I jump on the phone as soon as I get in the car, and I'm driving, and I'm halfway to Frankenmuth when I look down at my gas gauge and realize, oh my God, I didn't get gas. And so I'm hanging up the phone, my car is chugging, and I'm out of gas right before the exit to get off of like right there in Birch Run into Frankenmuth, right? So right there at the exit. And I'm like, I am no longer going to be on time to my meeting. I'm going to be late. I'm going to let my team down, right? So I'm in my head. It's going to be a bad day. It's going to be a bad day. I get out of my car. I walk to the gas station. I get to the gas station, and they don't have any gas. I can't even buy a gas can. They don't have any gas cans at this gas station. They say there's a car store or auto parts store down the road about a mile and a half down there. And I'm like, great. It's a day like yesterday where it's like, cold and misty and like it's not a nice day. And I'm like, great, I got to walk. And I'm walking there and I'm grumbling about my day when I caught myself in this programming of, wait a minute, today's not going to be a bad day unless I sit in the same mindset and I'd be miserable, right? Because now my behavior, like my decision making is controlled by today's going to be a bad day. My behavior is I'm upset and I'm grumbled and everything seems to be going against me. And if I show up to this auto parts store and I'm in a bad mood, like how do people receive me? Versus I show up at the auto parts store and I'm like laughing about my situation. I'm like, here I am. And like, I walk down here and we're joking. And the people, I'm entertaining the guys. And then they say, hey, do you need to ride back to your car? And I'm like, that would be amazing. Yeah, thank you. So they give me a ride back to my car. I go to start my car and my battery's dead because I tried to start my car too much and I killed my battery at the same time. And so because not only did that guy give me a ride and waited to see if my car started, he was still there. He had his jumper cables and he jumped my car. If I would have been in a different mood, that guy would have responded completely different. I would have had to walk back. Then my battery would have been dead. And can we see the layers of how my day becomes a bad day?
Oh, yeah. When you were talking, I was just envisioning like, you're walking and you're like you said, you missed out on like this opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And even just, I don't know, when it's the fact that we feel the air, you're walking. There's so many different ways to look at it, right?
Yeah.
To be able to be aware of what's really around you. Because when we're so in our head, we miss out on so much. And it doesn't mean we don't have emotion about things.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
just they don't linger all day, bad day.
One of the things we rehearse is just what Danette said is being in our head, right? And so let's say your scenario, you're walking to the gas station initially, and if you're in your head thinking about your team, you're going to be late, and you're ruminating on that, and then you're projecting into the future of what it's going to look like, and it's not going to be good, and negative, 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 right? And we do this rumination, and that's actually the rub because we're running into an automatic part of our brain. Because we're responding to something. Our nervous system is maybe saying an alert, right? Sending an alert. It's not a reward, but it kicks in an alert. There's danger. There's something going on. Are you going to be late? It just means something. I'm going to look bad, right? I'm wrong. People are going to be upset. Not going to accomplish the goals, blah, 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 right? It just goes on. And what we tend to do is let that automatic system just run, right? That's rumination. Well, we rehearse that part of it, of running the system, and it habituates. It creates a habit, right? When you rehearse and you rehearse and you
Mm.
rehearse, and so you basically rehearse yourself over a lifetime into being inward minds and thought patterns, and you can tell what are the
Mhm.
flags. Well, you in a conversation and you're not really listening to the other person. You're just waiting for the pause in order to say something, right? Key indicator that your inward mindset, you're in your head, you're ruminating, you're not present, right? So present would require being out here where life is happening and really listening, right? And then at the pause, taking it in and then going, okay, well then I have a response to that, or I have something to add to the conversation. But that takes practice, right? And if your system is rehearsed into being always inward mindset, it takes the intentional part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex and regions therein, that allow you to focus. When you focus, you're actually taking away the power of the lower limbic system, which is where a lot of that rumination and the emotional seat are all stemming from, other systems as well, but you're taking back control by executive control up here when you focus on a thing. So that's a way of interrupting the program, is just focusing on something specific, not related to whatever you're ruminating on. So like Danette said, you're walking back and you find if you the first part of the pattern to recovery in this is to awareness, right? So if you're aware that you're ruminating, that you're, going and you're reverberating the negative. So if you catch that and you go, oh, I'm just negative, right? Like Danette said, stop and stop that, stop it. You could say stop it,
Stop it.
like
Yeah.
Bob Newhart. Yeah. Stop it.
Ever since our last
Bury you.
episode, I hear that in
Yeah.
my head constantly.
I'll bury you alive in a box. So you stop the program, stop it, and then you change the focus. And like she said, you focus on the surroundings. It's like, oh wow, it's a nice cool breeze, or even if it's misty, just thinking about the mist and what does that feel like? And oh yeah, there's a chill. But you've just altered what your brain is attuning to. And by doing so, you attenuate that limbic system, because you're telling the alarm system, it's like, hey, yeah, I'm not worried about it. But if you attune to the alarm system, well, your brain's going, okay, keep running. So it's like keeping your smoke detector going, even though you've taken care of the thing you're burning on the stove or whatever. You've taken care of it, but you just let that thing run. And eventually, maybe you'll get used to it, but you'll have a seriously mild irritant going on for quite some time. And that's essentially what the anxiety does, right? You can
Mm.
normalize anxiety to where it's like a nuisance, but you're so it, you don't even notice that that alarm is going off.
Yeah.
It becomes normalized. It's normal to you now that,
Or how many times I've heard someone say, "Well, I'm an anxious person." Like, my gosh, you are creating that yourself about yourself.
well, it's creation
It's
language.
it's amazing that you're telling your brain, "I'm anxious."
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that one of the parts I was most disappointed about being cut out from the last one was the conversation on the I am statements. And because I think that's so powerful, and even going into the Bible and how many times I am is there.
Mm.
Yes. So being, right? I am the verb to be, am, right? So ontological focus, which is the state of being, right? So philosophically, that's an area of research and philosophy, deep discussion and thought. And yeah, in the Bible, his name is I am that I am, right? Is that he's the all existent, all being one. And we're referred to as human beings, but we never look at that.
Yeah, we're human doings.
Yeah, we become human doings.
Mm.
And so that begs the question, well, why? Why is that? Well, you look at how we're raised, and we're raised in a culture that's all about performance. And we don't separate when we're young with our children an understanding of the difference between self and in behavior, the
Mhm.
performance, right? And because we don't distinguish that, it blends together. So it conflates. So the domain of self and the domain of performance conflate together, right? So such that in our brains, we literally biologically fuse to or bond to the things that we do as an aspect or extension of our identity, right? Because in that process, we receive something. And what we receive is a very visceral, psychological, emotional need, which would include things like love, belonging, a sense of purpose, as well as, more importantly, value, worth, right? So where does it start? Well, you take an instance of little Johnny, who he cleans his room. So he's obedient. He does as he's asked. and then he gets a cookie reward, right? So we have a reward of a pleasurable item that reinforces a notion and thought, oh, I must be liked or I must be good, right? Good, bad. And so I'm good. I'm, of value in a sense, right? Now they're not able to abstract and analyze all this, but this is what's happening, right? And then Johnny doesn't, he doesn't clean his room one day when he's asked to, and it's a horrible mess, right? It's time to get schooled, so Johnny gets a spanking or gets admonished or something like that, and that doesn't feel good. There's no reward. Nervous system saying a threat. What's it associate the threat to? Associates the threat to I didn't do, right? It's a performance thing. I failed to perform. I didn't clean the room. Right, and so then that association comes, how do I feel? Well, yeah, I feel bad. It's, good, bad, scary, basically the lower limbic system picks up on. It doesn't know truth from fiction, and so it picks up on, "Ooh, that's bad," right? Then you ruminate as a little kid, "I must be bad." So sometimes I'm bad and sometimes I'm good. I try to lean towards good because it's more pleasurable. I get the reward systems there, right? But it's in that fusing of the performance that we start to tag it into sense of self and value and worth, and such that you get older in life and you find yourself really struggling because let's say your performance is not going so well, you can't get a job or you lost your job, you did something wrong or you made a big mistake and it's being held over you and blah, blah, blah. Your programming then kicks in, well, all along it's kicking in and it's tearing you down. So if you have like a value bucket, right, that kind of scenario is not filling your bucket, it's drawing away from the bucket. Right. And it can draw it all the way down to where you feel like if I say giving you your value 0 to 10, you might say, oh, I'm 0. I'm 0. I'm not
Mm.
worth anything. And I have clients tell me that, right, during some thought experiments and stuff I go through. So, yeah, it's a real thing, and that's data to show that, yeah, the construct, there's the programming is such that it uses a framework that has established their identity and their value and worth based upon other people's opinion and validation or invalidation of what they do, their work, right? So that's a model, and that's Danette mentioned the model before. It's do and have and be. So I'm going to do this, so I have this, and then I'll be successful, and I'll be liked, and then I'll be accepted, right? And that be is the identity component, of course, in the do, and then the receipt is in the have. And this is the pattern. We repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. And if we bring that back to biblical principles, you wonder, well, where did that pattern come from? It came way back in the garden with a certain couple who were tempted. And if you eat of this fruit, you will have enlightenment and then you'll be like God. And we know how that ended
We
up.
know all that.
Right. So that pattern got established way back, right? And it's alive and well today in our culture in this world, right? And what's interesting is that's an anti-pattern because the true pattern that was given by God that they actually lived from when they were created is the opposite of that. It's be, have, do. So Satan, the evil one, always inverts, right? Anything God has. And so that's what he did when he introduced that pattern, because that's how he was living or does live. The be, have, do is where you identity comes first. It's established by an authority. So the established authority of identity, of value and worth, then you have salvation or you have assurance or you have love or you have blessing. And then the do is, okay, now I'll engage my work. And it's illustrated throughout the Bible. If you take a look at these patterns, because we're pattern creatures, when Jesus got baptized in the river, the Jordan, John's there and the skies open up and the dove comes down like this. The spirit comes down like a dove. And then the father says, this is my beloved son, be in him. I'm well pleased. Listen to him, have. And then he went into the desert and started his ministry, do the work. So he entered into the work. He entered into the work and performance. That performance isn't bad. We're meant
It's
to work.
important.
We have purpose,
Yeah.
but it comes identity
Yeah.
and identity blessing or identity affirmation.
Yeah, and
Amazing.
it's so important, and it's important to speak into our children so that they, because it's just learning how to operate with other humans. You're teaching your children the way they should go, right? And so even being intentional about when you have to discipline or correct or whatever, that it's not them. It's a choice that they made has a consequence, but they're loved beyond measure. Nothing ever changes that, who they are. That they're, beautiful, wonderful children of God and of, your family, and nothing can change that. You still have a consequence for the choice, but it keeps it solid ground as
Yep.
they grow and really develop. So that's so important. And being intentional is not easy to do, but it's critical to do for our kids. Because it wasn't done for you, wasn't done for me, wasn't done for John, and it wreaked all kinds of havoc. Not that I'm blaming my parents at all. They loved me as best as they could. But boy, had I gotten that message early, what a
Oof.
lot of heartache it would have saved.
Jeez, yeah. Well, it's kind of like you have to go through that experience too, a little bit. But then you think about, then you get into work and it's all that performance based, and that's where it's really intriguing in what you
Yeah,
got to
and it's
do.
really, it's like that fine line because you wanna perform well, you wanna perform with integrity and take care of people, and all those things are all important. And it's really, we're not flawless. We don't do it well all the time, but it doesn't impede me self. I may not like it, if I failed at something or didn't live up to what I wanted, but it doesn't have to linger in this terrible person. I made a mistake or whatever that is. And that's a big difference.
Big difference.
You made me. That's the minute you give away your power. Boom, you're in victim, right? You can say, I am mad at the moment. I'm not mad as a permanent state or a permanent way of being, right? I have an emotion I'm feeling. You express that, of course, right? And it may be necessary, but anger and those types of things, those are emotional states and alarms. Our system will kick off an alarm that, hey, something's wrong here. There's a threat here. We need to address it. What we do though is we keep the alarm running. So you think about it, your alarm system in your head is very much like your smoke detector in your house. Everybody's probably smoked the kitchen up at some point.
Yes, yeah.
Set that thing.
Toast.
Yeah. And that
Toast.
alarm goes off, right? And the first thing we wanna do is we wanna shut it down because it's piercing, it hurts, right? So we'll do whatever we can, wave a cloth over, try to get the smoke away from it, whatever, shut it down. Alright, because it's not comfortable. But what we do as humans is our smoke alarms go our amygdala, the seat of our fear-based and alarm system, they go off, and then we'll live in it. We'll literally live in it. And we become so accustomed and normalized to it that we think we have to in order to motivate us or to I've learned that this gets things done or it makes change happen and whatever. All lies, right? But it's adaptations but you've created it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
It's intense when you look and see that you created it all, and like you're how many layers deep you are into that.
yeah. Well, there's always consequences to what you create, but it's what you're reinforcing here because all of those notions of whatever you're creating in the moment are driven from something. Well, if you never look to the core of what's at the base of all of that, which is
Mhm.
a perception of your own self and identity, right? It will come through. It's projected. It's integrated. It's part of what you believe and why you believe it, and the notions that stem from that, and then ultimately what you project onto the world. And if you look at the core, you'll learn a lot and you can examine, well, where did that come from? Why do I do that? And then go back and see, well, it's like a house of cards. If you can see that a certain stance or position is based upon a lie and you replace it with the truth, well, then that whole house of cards falls down. So you don't have to be in therapy years and years and years because you just removed the structure, the framework that was supporting particular thoughts and behaviors and beliefs, right?
Mhm.
Immediately. And then now you are primed to rebuild, and that takes something, but now you're focused, right? So you're using your intentional focus repeatedly and just do the same thing the way you created the other stuff, just rehearse, 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 but in the newly revised version of you.
And then I'm just thinking about how because, everywhere you go, there you are. We talk about like the grass is greener on the other side. I've seen so many
Mhm.
people like, when this happens, life
Oh,
will be
yeah.
good. When this happens, life will be good. When I get this job over here, life will be good. And they get there and sure enough, it turns out into another disappointing situation,
Right,
and it's because you're not changing. You're just changing your environment, but then
right.
you're plugging yourself into that spot and you're finding the same vibrations.
I'm the common
I'm the
denominator.
common denominator there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, I think about families today and how they're just running. If you got kids in sports and you got multiple kids and all you're doing is ships passing in the night and it's very, very doing focused. And so it's really examining that what John's been talking about. What am I creating for myself? Who am I really? And what do I want to create wherever I go? Joy is a big word for me. I want to create joy and encouragement and knowing that truth of what I'm creating for my life and those around me is so important to define for each person so that when it's not happening, it's easier to recognize it, to pay attention. That's the alarm then, smoke alarm. Smoke alarm's going off. What's really going on here?
Mhm.
Why am I operating in this other way that's not my ideal self? And so, yeah, that's really, really a big flip of the script.
Well, and you talked about that human doing. It can get you just go through the motions and life become, you wake up, go to work,
Mhm.
pet the dog, like do the things, come home, make dinner, pet the dog, go to sleep, go wake up, do the same thing over and over again.
Groundhog Day.
It's Groundhog Day and you get that tunnel vision because you're just reacting. And I had this client one time that was like, "I worked so hard to climb this ladder." I sweat, I put everything into it. I climbed this ladder and I got all the way up to the top of the building and I realized, "Why am I why am I up here? Like, why did I climb this ladder? What am I doing? I'm on the wrong ladder. I need to go over there." And it's just because you put yourself in that tunnel vision that whole time.
Well, yeah, you're so we're driven by our brains are seeking reward versus threat. And depending on what we program, depending on our life experiences and what we think we want, right? We're going to be pursuing that. We talked about adrenaline junkies, those who got well, it's an addiction. It's addiction to the release of dopamine. Could even be an oxytocin, all these excitatory connecting type of chemicals that we have swimming through our body. But this is what drives the addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever. It's what we've created in our lives and what we focus on and what we rehearse. It's actually really that simple, right? And so depending on if you realize you're heading in a direction you don't want to go, right? You had a goal that you set and like you said, you climbed the ladder, you got to the top, then wait a minute, is this really what I wanted? Or
Yeah.
then what?
Yeah,
Right? That's the biggest issue. It's driving, and then what, right? Danette
Right.
mentioned so we're creatures of habit, we would say, right? So that's habituation, it's referred to. It's patterns.
Mm.
So we create patterns and then we repeat the patterns. And our brain is structured to encode patterns, and that's the automatic part of our system. And so, automation is not bad, right? In itself, we program what we've programmed, but usually the negative things that we just keep repeating, that's in that part of our brain. But cruise control can be very useful, but it's like, what do we put in there that's going to be played out regularly? And if you see something that persists but is not wanted, that's a clear indication you're running an automatic program that's been loaded and you're running you know, subjective reality through it. But these ideas about what I really liked about that story about the climbing the ladder is why did you climb the ladder in the first place?
yeah, yep.
What were you creating motivation to do that?
Your parents told you had to get a good job and you had to go to school and then you had to get married and then you had to go have you had to
Yeah.
have kids and you look at society and it's a long time it's like you get married and now everybody's like, all right, when you having kids, you're married now, and it's like that next pressure and you're taking those next steps and the next thing you know, you're 30 years old with 3 kids and a job you hate.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And you're going, okay, well, what is this pattern I'm following? And Danette said it. It's do, have, be,
Hmm.
all right? So I'm gonna do. So do is performance, right? That's how
Yeah.
we fall into human doing because that becomes the primary focus because it's the cause for everything else that follows. So I'm gonna work really hard and get this great job. Then I'll have money, maybe I'll have status, and then I'll be happy or then I'll be successful, right? It's a state of being. The sense of value and worth comes out of that, right? So, what's necessary? Well, what's necessary to achieve that, and usually we don't achieve it. It's like at the horizon. We're always going after it. That's why you can climb the ladder and say, "Oh, if I just climb this ladder and get to the top in this company or whatever I'm doing here, hey, then I'll be successful. Then I'll be somebody."
Mhm.
And then you get there and you go, "Well, okay. Well, this
Well,
isn't all
this
what I
isn't
thought it was gonna be.
great.
This isn't great." Yeah. Right. So you're in that pattern, and it's constantly I've got to do so that I can have, then I can be. So it's a striving pattern. We could actually call it the anti pattern, right? Because it's one in which you're on the hamster wheel.
Hmm.
You're striving. You're just constantly striving. Why? To be something, to be affirmed, to be worthy, to be good enough, to be, accepted, to be all these things. And the minute the performance decays or drops or is suddenly gone, well, this comes crashing down, right? Because now who am I? I don't have that to drive this anymore. This goes back to the story of why we started the work that we did, the problem that people had retiring and moving, leaving this business that was part of their doing, right? And they're having, and then being from that. Now it's gone. She just pulled the rug out
Mhm.
from under me. Who am I now? What do I do? Am I valuable?
Am I valuable? And you're looking at
Right.
people that were successful, that
Yeah.
had value, but they tied all their importance to the thing they did.
Well, it's the role they did, the status they had, the people around them, the fight they were in, the battle or if you're a business owner,
Yep.
going after.
You're in the war. Yep.
We had a colleague who didn't go through our program, but he had sold a business, made oh,
Lots of money.
lots of money, close to $1 billion, right? It was tons of money, all the money you couldn't spend the money in your lifetime, and he was terribly upset. And he'd talk about the whole experience of selling his business and everything. He's just ticked. I'm like, "Why are you so ticked? You got all this money." 'Cause, I was a warrior, and now I'm not a warrior. I'm not in the war anymore. I'm not in the game, right? I was on top. I would go after the competition. I would try to buy them out and win. I'd win, win. So it was, like, all psychological. It was all of it was part of the construct, and when we're attached to something that forms a sense of our identity, even our
Hmm.
spouses or whatever, it's actually a biological construct in our brains, that attachment, right? It's the region called the insula, which is kind of just below the prefrontal cortex, but it's a region that takes a look at bodily signals and everything else, and it mediates signaling from outside sources as well, and other regions of the brain that support the sense of self. The called I don't want to get tech. It's ventral striatum. And so it pulls this information, stores this, and so that if there's a threat that's been seen by the limbic system, right? And that talks to the regions that are establishing your sense of self. So now that there's an alarm going off, like, oh, this is a threat to myself because I'm going to lose this thing. It's all consuming, right? It's all consuming. The very first story that you shared about the woman and
Yeah.
stepping down from leadership and all of that. Yeah. So this is what she was going through. She was a leader. She was somebody. She had responsibility. She was in the know, the communication emails. All of a sudden, she's not. Right. Okay, that's what happened. Then she made it mean something. I'm less important. I'm not valuable. They're out to get me. They want to destroy me. Blah blah blah. Right. So now we can take a look at it and we analyze it. There's two parts to that. There's what happened. What
Yep.
happened? She stepped down. So that's
Choice.
yeah,
Choice.
that was a choice. That was real. It happened. I mean, it really happened. Text to that, which is what you make it mean. The story, right? I'm not worthy. I'm not liked. I'm not valued anymore. Blah blah blah. Right? That's a story. Who authored the story?
She did.
Exactly. She's got to understand that she's the author of that story. The story is actually not the reality. The reality is what happened. She's crafted the internal narrative of, well, this is what it means. This is how I interpret it. This is how I internalize it. Right. Well, where'd that story come from? That story was drafted from a visceral, deep level truth about her view of herself and her identity and her value,
Mhm.
which the data showing of what she created says that her her view of herself is that her values not very
Mhm.
much. right? Or
Mhm.
that it's so strongly related to what she does that because she stepped down and all these, that's how her brain compiles it and said, this is the net result. You're currently not worth very much. Right? And then there's an adaptation and a defense mechanism that kicks in because, we want to survive, but whatever it was in the past, that's what you're going to repeat. Right? I got to talk myself up. I got to point the finger. I got to blame people. I got to be a victim.
Can't possibly be
Right.
me.
Wash,
And
rinse,
all
repeat.
of those things are happening, work is slipping, like, everybody's noticing, it is creating exactly, like I said, what she is saying is happening, and it's her story, she's authoring it.
Exactly. And this goes to that book, Three Laws of Performance. How a situation occurs to you is directly proportional to how you'll perform in that position or within that
Hmm.
circumstance, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, if you're viewing all of this, well, what would you expect then the correlate to be on that performance? To be low performance.
Being
Mhm.
in sales my work whole career, and I love applying this to that because and I would always start off. I always start off trainings with the "Who are you?" Who are you statements. Like, tell me who you are, and people are like, "I'm a husband, a father." They start digging in.
Yep.
Like, I'm an artist. I'm a. They're going in and like saying these things. Awesome. Okay, the phone is in your hand. You're calling up. You're cold calling a prospect that's not expecting your call. Who are you? I'm a slimy salesperson. Someone that's bugging someone. I'm a pest. I'm a, like, because now your value has shifted. When you go home, you're with your friends. This is who you naturally are. When you go to work and you're making those sales calls, this is who I am. You're reading from the script. And my point is bring this person over here into here. Because if you can bring your personality and your value with you to these conversations, it's now a different story versus that image that you are in your mind.
Yes. And what you
Hmm.
bring up is a very common problem of compartmentalization. Right? Where this person over here, where that person over there. We see this in the church, right? A lot of people have a problem with Christianity or faith because it's like, okay, yeah, you're good at church and you act like a holy saint, and then you go home and you beat your family or you yell at people or you're just, whatever. It's not consistent. There's a lack of coherence between the two states, and it's kind of like, well, who are you really? Like, what do you really believe, and so forth. But we find a lot of people are dysregulated and not integrated. So they're disintegrated in their lives because that's what they learn to do. So that's what they rehearse, right? I got to be this way. And there's motivating factors to drive that behavior in that particular setting, in that context, right? Again, I want to look good, avoid looking bad, right? I'm going to be right, avoid being wrong. And that takes on all sorts of permutations. So if you allow yourself to operate like the greater culture does or the dynamic, you're going to just take it on. Well, this is what happens, right? We kind of normalize, settle on this type of thinking, this way of thinking about our thinking, or even just thinking about ourselves. It's what's created, and we don't step out of it. We don't look to see is there another way to do this, right? Because in your earlier shares there, it's value. If you look at that value proposition with the lady, what's the value based in? It's based in that performance. That's an extrinsic paradigm for value proposition, external dependencies on it we talked about earlier, right? So what's the other way to look at that? Well, the only other way is to go from the external to the internal. Internal is intrinsic value proposition. What is
Yeah.
your intrinsic value? The value of just you, and starting to measure that. And we have a really cool little experiment where we help illustrate this that people really sinks in, right? So do you have children?
Yes, I have one. Yep,
Okay,
a son.
what's their name?
His name's Jackson.
Jackson. So, do you love Jackson?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, how much?
The whole world, like one of those things, like that unconditional love.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
immense, right?
Yep.
Alright, and does Jackson have value?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, well, what did you do for that value?
Just born. Like
You're saying he was born, did he have value when he was born? Like, when he came out of that womb, did he have value?
yes,
Okay, interesting, did you love him?
absolutely.
Alright, so Jackson did nothing, so there was no doing here at
Yeah,
all. He was just being.
just being.
He's just being. So, and
Showed
you
up.
yeah, and you as the parent, right, conferred upon Jackson value, immense measurable value, probably take a bullet for him kind of value, and love, unconditional love, right? It was just for who he is, right? So the truth is, even if Jackson grows up and he's growing up, he runs into some issues and whatever, he doesn't feel like he's got any value. He feels whatever because he's allowed the circumstances to define him. Well, what's the truth? Does Jackson have no value because he doesn't think he does?
No, he still has value. He just doesn't see it
Right. And he has value because why?
because he's just born.
Well, he
But
does,
because
but
somebody loves him
yeah,
or
because you
yeah.
said so.
You
Yeah.
said
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
logic
Mhm.
is that, yeah, it doesn't matter the individual. If there's somebody values you, you have value, right? You can value you, and that's a very good place to start,
That's a very
right?
good place to start, yeah.
You know, that's how you love your neighbor as yourself, right? You think about that statement as a biblical quote. It's a really big one. There's an implication. If you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, what's the first question?
Do you love
Do
yourself?
you love yourself, and how are you loving yourself? Because that's how you're going to love your neighbor or not. So,
Well, and then you think about it, like, going through like elementary school and that kind of thing and being bullied and always like my mom always saying, well, like they feel worse about themselves than they do. And that's why they're picking on you. And growing up and realizing how true that is
yep.
didn't make me feel better then, but
No.
you can see they don't have value for themselves and or love for themselves, so they're going to outward project that to the people around them.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why it's so important to give that message to your children, right? That their behavior is separate from self. They may make choices that you don't necessarily like it, but their value and their worth is immeasurable no matter what they're doing. They
Mhm.
just, in this particular instance, might not have made the best choice, but it doesn't impede their
Their
value and
value.
worth. We don't train up our children with that messaging, right? And then we all fall into this trap of the doing. The performance defines us, and that's where it all spins out. It's the anti-pattern, like John said.
Yeah.
So
So that
speaking that truth to our kids, in the midst of, discipline, right? You discipline the behavior, but it's important to reinforce that it doesn't have any effect on how much you love and care about them and who they are. They're whole and complete, even in the midst of poor choices.
Mhm.
And that's a big, big.
That's a big deal, a big adjustment.
Mhm.
yeah, well, our society is geared towards this is why all this stuff takes place early in life. It's
Yeah.
the early formation, the genesis of your thoughts about yourself, begin then. And because it's propagated from generation to generation, it never alters, right? Because we don't think of breaking these things apart. Like Danette was
Mm-mm.
saying, we're not breaking apart yourself from the things that you do. And so when you're growing up, parents are raising their kids, doing the best they can. Johnny doesn't clean his bedroom. Okay, he gets either yelled at or he gets a spanking or he gets some mission that admonition that, hey, you did wrong, right? And if that happens over and over, because Johnny happens to be a bright orange personality type and a quick start in Colby, and he forgets and is on to the next thing, and he just doesn't clean the room. But the mom is a strong gold personality and a fact finder
Like,
follow through in Colby, who wants it to be just a certain way. She's interpreting the world through those lenses of how she's wired, right? So she gets all upset. Oh, I got to amp it up here. So he's going to get punishment, spankings, and take things taken away because you're just not learning. You're not doing what I want you to do do, right? So the focus is on what you're doing or not doing. Johnny's feeling like he's attacked or like he can't do anything right because he's maybe cleaned his room once, but he left it dirty again later,
Hmm.
right? So that the punishment comes back down just as hard. So for a little kid, they're just going, gosh, man, I just can't win here. I'm suck. I'm not worthy of anything. But then he cleans his room and he gets a cookie, and well, that feels good. Well, it's like, okay, well, all right, so I got to focus on what I do here. I'll try to real hard. So boom, it's the tie-in and the correlation is I perform well, I'll get something good and I'll feel good, right?
Mhm.
I just got to know how I got to perform, and then we just carry that through the rest of our life. That's the construct.
And I just think and I've been around people that are I had one of the highest performing sales guys I've had on my team was constantly filling holes in his life, and so he would buy the cars or date the women or,
Mhm.
make the money, and he was like, "More, more, 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 and then I'll be happy." And it's like,
It's the pattern.
it's those patterns, and you've to really you're never gonna be happy, and then that's what leads to the addictions and
Yep.
drugs
Mhm.
and because 'cause you're
100%.
constantly trying to fill that hole.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the do have be, right? It's that pattern.
Yeah, the performance is important, right? It's just not
Yes.
yeah, it's not the definition of who I am, right? I want to do well. I think it was last week or the week before, we had a client that was, we gave a proposal to, and they wanted a little more detail. So we spent, the time, did it, broke it apart, did what they asked, sent it out that same day. I got an email a couple days later. Were you guys going to get that, to me? And I was like, wait, I sent it. Okay. I copied a couple people, didn't put the two in the email. So I didn't send it to him. And thankfully I saw the error, but I was like, when you have that moment and you just, your heart
Yep.
starts beating, my armpits are sweating. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that. So of course I sent it off and apologized. But I was so thankful that I had the tools that we teach, because I could have spent
Mm,
a couple days feeling really crappy about myself.
mm.
Right? It was an honest mistake, and, I acknowledged it and, the impact, as far as having integrity about it, and then I could move on, because it doesn't define me.
Yep.
I made a mistake. I didn't perform how I wanted to. I was less than my optimal performance, but that's okay.
So we take the script, the pattern, and we invert it. And we call this the true pattern, which is where you start from being your identity, then you have, and then you go and you perform or you do your work. So if you understand your intrinsic value, you begin from there. What you have is a level of assurance, validation, confidence, blessing, right? On that. Then you take that mindset and that positioning into the work you do and you perform from there, but you're not having to strive for the work. You're going to want to perform well, but if you fail or don't meet the objective, it doesn't crush you, your
Mm.
sense of value and worth, because that construct, that reframed value proposition is solid, stable. It's like building it on bedrock versus the do have be is built on sand, always shifting, always moving. This one becomes solid and stable. So the core of it is to have a very strong, unmovable sense of value. The question is, where does that come from? Because if the source of that confirmation is you, it's gonna fail. It's
Mm.
gonna crumble, because self-doubt will creep in and start to negate or work against that belief structure. Plus, trying to create a value proposition that's driven by you, you're fighting your notions that you've created against the programming you've already programmed. And it's almost a no-win situation, because again, the minute you have the doubt, boom, it reinforces the old programming, which is a super highway of neural connections, versus the path in the woods you started to try to form to reprogram, right? So boom, it fails. So it has to be an authority greater than yourself that acts as the bestowing or the conferring of that value upon yourself. And that's just is the way it is. I don't care what you believe in life. That's just how the structure works, how our human system operates, because you'll end up defaulting back into
Well,
performance.
and what's fun about this is because you talk about predictability, and we're all predictable, and I don't care what business you're in or what you do for a living. This is if you really master this stuff, you really like the world starts to open up for you because you're dealing with people. Like everything is people. If you're doing B2B business or B2C or any of the stuff, if you can connect on this level with people, it really is. It's the key.
Yeah, people are complex, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of variability in people, but the more you understand yourself, the more you'll understand others, right? And within that comes a maturity and an ability to empathize, right? To see another person's situation, to where you temper or are able to throttle your response to another individual, because when you can see where they're at, like what they're dealing with, and you learn not to internalize everything, not to make it all about you, but because in the do have be pattern, it
Mm.
is all about you,
Yeah.
right?
It is.
That's the nature of that framework, that construct. Yeah, but when you're secure in yourself and you're solid and stable, you can be with somebody else. And like the leadership and self-deception book is, you can be present even in the face of a storm, right? There's a really cool Bible illustration of Jesus and his disciples are in a boat going across the Sea of Galilee, and this huge storm kicks up, and Jesus is sleeping in the boat. and these disciples are going nuts.
Freak it out.
They're freaking out. And they're fishermen. They know these waters, but they're freaking out. And they wake him up and go, "Don't you know we're gonna die here?" Right? And Jesus wakes up and just kind of shakes his head and goes, holds up his hands and he says, "Peace, be still." And then the storm just totally calms, right? And the idea is they had no idea who was in the boat with them, and they just didn't get it, or they did, but they weren't realizing the truth of it. But all of their worry, all of their anxiety, and everything else, the truth is it wasn't doing them any good. Actually, it was hindering them because they couldn't think. When you're in an automatic mode and your alarm systems are going off, your system actually shifts control to the limbic system, right, and to the pre-programmed parts of your brain, and and takes away the control from the executive center. It's why if you ever get in an argument, a real good argument with your spouse or something,
A
and
good
then
one.
later, and you get frustrated and you walk away, and then you simmer down, your parasympathetic system calms you down, and now you're starting to think clearly, and you're like, I should have said this. Oh, and I should have said that. I should have said that, but you didn't because you couldn't.
It wasn't calm at that point.
It was not calm. You were in the automatic mode, and that was shutting off. And people who sustain that level of hypersensitivity and they're in the alarm state all the time. So their limbic system is really in control, and they're dumping cortisol into the system constantly, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all these key chemicals to put your body in that state. Your limbic system, the amygdala, actually swell in size, and the prefrontal cortex shrinks. So you're actually biophysiologically affecting your system.
Terrible.
Yeah, man, and this is the body's response to the conditions that you're saying is what's so here, right? So it's
Yeah.
very dangerous, and it has a lot of other implications too from a biophysiological perspective of the receptors and everything else and how it's treating with the chemicals and the neurotransmitters and all that. It literally alters the construct when you sustain these alert. They call it the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is what it's called, and it's a system that kicks in that sets you up, right? The HPA, you can think of it as HPA. And when you keep that system running, it reduces or suppresses your immune system. So you get sicker, right? You have all sorts of things starting to happen to you. It's a horrible state. And where's it all driven from? It's driven from your programming, your thoughts.
State when those chemicals are dumping and you don't have clear thinking. That's why with kids we do the tornado drills and the fire drills, so that in that state of uncertainty and chaos, there's a pattern that's already built, right? And that just goes back to that, you're training your brain, those neural pathways, if you can think of it. So it's going back and looking at patterns that you have and what doesn't work. Like, what patterns in my life are not working for me?
It's the Navy SEAL saying of in times of chaos, we don't rise to the occasion, but we fall back to our level of training. We fall back
that's
to
it,
that
yeah.
their fallback position. So foundations of boot camp is we've got to talk it out loud. It's like if you're not comfortable saying what you're doing here in this group and going through it, what's going to make you confident and comfortable when you're out in the
Right.
wild?
Right, in the wild.
Out in the wild. It is so true.
Yeah.
It is. So going all the way back and you're doing the boot camps and then you start working with the companies and helping them really look at that life after selling and kind of, who are they? Through that process, you're still working in corporate America, right?
No.
No, not at this point. Okay.
No. I'm devoted to this. We started in 17. I left corporate America in 23.
Okay.
So we've been 100% focused on this work.
Well, I know you're not now, but I mean, when you first started back here.
Still, I was doing transformation work and one of the big three. Frustrating because the context is not one in which people necessarily want to transform. You might have some upper management, senior management. Oh, we want to transform and do this thing, but they don't understand what it takes, and there's not full buy-in, and there's not. It just the dynamic doesn't work. Yeah. So it was like a lesson in beating your head against the wall and would work out. But it was a great lesson. It was a great, I had some good experiences at that latter part when we were implementing these major transformations. But yeah, we apply it now to businesses and individuals. Our focus is working with the lower middle market, so entrepreneurs, the founders there, they got a leadership team and they got some number of people, could be, I don't know, 25 to 100,
Yeah.
10 or something, some number where it's manageable, where it's not little kingdoms everywhere, like a
Yeah.
large corporation. And the owner is got the influence and they understand their influence and they've got solid leaders. So we do a lot of the human work, and then we'll also do work on the structure of the business, the organization, the systems, practices, and the culture. And that's basically an areas we'll work at. And then also working with individuals not in business, just personal uh, people who are looking to do some work on their life, transform,
Yeah.
rethink their, what's important to them and where they want to go.
Business
Amazing.
leaders that we really love to work with are those that are investing in their culture, right? And they really understand it's their people are the greatest asset of the business. A lot of people say that, but there's not everybody actually puts the action there.
Yep.
So it's for us, then the work that we do, it's got to start with the leadership of the organization. Otherwise, it just is really difficult. It doesn't work.
Well, you're probably gonna you're gonna train people that are gonna leave their jobs because they're self-aware, and then they go out and find something different if
Yeah,
the leadership is not making a change.
sure. Yeah,
I can
because
see that
think
happening.
Yeah.
each time we spend working,
Oh, for sure.
ought to have time,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
right?
And I know like small businesses are my people too, because in corporations it's so hard. There's so many layers in often the leadership team thinks it's a great idea to get everybody else training, but then they're not willing to actually make the change.
That's all the major corporations.
Yeah.
Want the teams doing the work to learn and grow and do their, but the line of command, chain of command. When I was talking to them about that, like, what do you mean? Well, here's how it works out, and here's why you're having such challenges with the transformation as it is, right? People aren't buying in because you're not buying it.
Go figure. People actually follow the leader, you know?
Absolutely.
They do. Well, yeah, and they follow not always for the good. A lot of that is you're following the leader if they're the ones who sign your check, right? You're following whatever they say, right? You're if you're accountable to them, they're not going to change if there's not a good context in order to transform,
Yep.
change things.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just the truth. And the small or large, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So it's important. Yeah, so we prepare, like, for business owners, we prepare them for a future succession plan. It doesn't have to be right away, but there's no better time to be psychologically looking at yourself as a leader, prepare yourself for eventual, see the
Ambition.
end in mind in
Mhm.
a sense, because then you're just that much more prepared as you build that business, and you're better equipped, and you're creating a culture that's more conducive and aligned with human behavior and what people are like, because you elevate people and their value and importance. Why? Because you value yourself, you can value others.
Yep.
So at the end, it becomes a great place to work.
Right.
And you're focused on unique ability and skills, and you're in the right person in the right seat, and people are doing what they're wired to do, and they're not chasing after striving in that pattern, right? They're able to be free and be them. Yeah, our tagline is "Live a life of freedom," and that's at first people, have an idea about that, but it's really truly live a life of freedom, freedom from striving, from that anti pattern, the old pattern, that you're actually good enough, you're actually valuable and worthy, and now you can take your attention away from that and focused on what your skills are and exercising them and, feeling good about what you do in that space. And
When John said about live a life of freedom, I have this picture in my mind of this little boy coming into a restaurant, and it was July, and he had his Halloween costume on, and he
Yeah.
doesn't care
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
thinks.
Yeah.
Right in that moment, he wants to be Batman, right? And that's totally free. He was just completely
Great.
free to be who he wanted to be in that moment. It was just so cool, and that's the freedom.
Isn't that interesting when we're that young and we have that much freedom? Because I remember, and you talk about being the superhero, and it just made me smile because I remember I used like my mom let me wear my underwear on the outside of my sweatpants, and I like wore a towel around and would let me go out in the public like that, and I didn't care at all. But then at some point, I cared what everybody thought. I was deathly
Something's
afraid.
wrong. Yeah, that's the point. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. You get this sense that you never had before about
Yeah.
how people view you, how you occur.
Yeah.
or even if it was scary or if the event was bad or something, caused you to recalibrate and say, "Well, shouldn't do this," or I can't be this," or "I gotta try to feel good, so I'm gonna create this." Lots of permutations, but yeah.
What's one of your favorite recent client stories or yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah, I know it's a hard one, but I always love hearing the stories.
Hmm.
Let's see. Alright, boy. Okay, just pick one, John.
I have one, recent John and I did not work with this client together. We have another gentleman, Tom, that works with us, and he and I were coaching together. And she described in the beginning of our program that she just felt like there was this wall around her. Like she just, even though, and she was a very generous, like giving person, right? Fun to be around. But she felt this wall. And we were like on our fourth, after even like our fourth session, she's like, my gosh, that wall is gone. And our clients, do these journals. And so, and I could see the language shifting for her, as she got the truth of her true identity, her true intrinsic value. She was no longer reliant on what people thought of her.
Mm.
And it just gave her that level of freedom. Actually, it was a transformed a relationship that she had in her workplace where she was looking for the evidence of how he didn't like her. And then she was able to just turn that around. It was so cool. It just like my heart sings. It just is amazing. And when she was like, I don't have that wall.
Uh,
I was like, oh, yeah, super cool. It was mine.
I got one. So, had a client come in, a part of a company, right? So, we were working with the key leaders. They were not in a good place. They had recently gotten divorce papers put on the table, and, so he wasn't in a very good place. But he was a little skeptical, right? His senior leaders, the owner and so forth, were like, "Hey, you gotta go do this program, I think it'll be really good for you." So he did, and he was kinda he was at his end, right? Um, and a little bit of background, actually does sales, right? Interesting. But the way he was running his life and the relationship with his wife and so forth, it was very separate. They were raising their kids. It's not uncommon. Raising the kids,
mm,
and he was providing and she was raising the kids, and that was the way. And he had his hobbies and he would go do his hobbies, and then he'd do trips, like he'd go like out of state to do part of his hobby, right? He would go just out of state, and that's he would just go, right? And it just had created this dynamic that isn't conducive to relationship building, right? It's conducive to, okay, building a life and, taking care of things, but not to building a relationship.
Together.
And yeah, together.
together.
Yeah. And so suddenly, out of the
Suddenly without
blue,
warning.
without warning, got these papers served, right? Obviously, we know that there's warning signs and there was probably talks or fights at least or something that would lead up to it. But it's just an example of how, we can really get a tunnel vision on our life. And not to mention, he wasn't really a happy person, and it came out. He'd be frustrated easy and he'd do these, say these things. Just how he projected, how he occurred to people was, just you never knew if you're gonna set him off or not. You know? And so he came in but he was coachable at this point
Mm.
because
Ah,
he's hitting rock
phenomenal.
bottom. He didn't want this divorce. And within 2 months, just 2 months, so what's that? 4 sessions. He granted he had a faith too that was a foundation, right? But
Yep.
not really aligned with his faith, right? So he was in the area of distortion, not truth, right? So so 4 sessions with a lot of homework in between, but he did the homework. He took it on and he did it. And what came as a result of that is actually he didn't control his wife one bit. As a matter of fact, his wife was suspect of what we were doing, and all these things. But he just focused on reprogramming himself and recentering to truth about himself and exiting the anti pattern and getting into the true pattern. And he ended up influencing his wife in a major way, a positive way. And then that change of his thinking altered who he was being when he was with his wife and coworkers and others, right? And then
Hmm.
it altered what he was doing as a result, like spending time. It altered him being present. It just totally started transforming his whole state of being in all areas of his life to the point to when within 2 months they were dating again. The papers had kind of gone off the table and they were rebuilding a relationship. Come to discover that his wife absolutely loved the hobby he was involved with
Wow.
and ended up doing that on a regular basis. They ended up, found another hobby of, four-wheeling and stuff like that, like side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she loved that, he loved that, and so now they're
Doing
doing this,
trips
doing
and
trips and doing
That's
these excursions
amazing.
together, and then, he had a challenge with his son, his oldest son, I think it was another marriage or whatever, but he started rekindling this relationship with his older son, just transforming his life 180 degrees, just total transformation. And we're not sitting here taking credit for it.
mm-mm.
That was quite honestly, I'll say it's a God thing, but it was he chose.
Yes.
He did the work. He listened and learned and put it into practice, what we were laying before him. And as a result, he reaped this benefit and a
Mm.
positive consequence of stepping out of who he really, because all everything he was expressing wasn't really him.
Yeah.
He'd even admitted, "No, I just don't know why I do it." Right. So it's like, you don't want to be this way. You don't want to be this. Being this is your projection of being, where it's angry, frustrated, condemning and unloving and blah blah blah. All being was to being loving and attentive and respectful and
Helpful.
helpful and considerate. And all these are all being words. Like, who are you being? And he made that shift. He made the shift. He wasn't pressured to make the shift. It
Mhm.
wasn't,
Mm.
coerced. It wasn't anything else like that. He just didn't want the consequence of who he was being to come about, right? Which was this divorce. So yeah, that was a fantastic, amazing story.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it still goes today. It's not that there's not troubles or how you
Yeah, it's
deal with it, right?
mhm.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
keep things moving forward in a positive direction. Yeah.
Well, and I loved you, and you kind of addressed it a little bit ago, but as I'm thinking, as I'm listening to this, and a common misconception I get, especially when I'm talking about inward, outward, and like the way approaching people and stuff like that, is like, oh, that just sounds really soft, or you got to make money, or like the different, you got to do these things in order. If you're not just doing, then what's your driving force to go out and do these, to go out and make something of yourself, or and to me, this is a way of being, but it's not soft. And I like to use Tom Izzo as an example from Michigan State basketball coach. And from an example of like, if you look at this guy, he seems so angry. I remember a few years ago, there was a tournament game and he was like just angry at one of his players and he was yelling at him. And like the guy walked away from him and he grabbed him by the arm and he was like, finished his conversation. He was yelling and the announcers were like, this guy's out of control. Like this guy is the game has passed him by. He can't talk to players like that anymore. And like this is what is he even doing? And like there's all this criticism of him. And the player afterwards, they asked him, what happened there and what are your thoughts? And he was like, that man loves me. Like, he just wants me to be successful, and I came here specifically to play for him because I knew he was gonna tell me what I didn't wanna hear. He wasn't gonna just tell me that I'm the greatest thing, he wasn't gonna just tell me all good, he was gonna be in my face because he wants the most of me, and there's a big difference between having the boss or the leader that's, like, in your face and yelling and screaming because they want you to move an object and hit a goal and drive a number, not saying that Tom Izzo doesn't wanna win or anything else, but at the end of the day, he wants the most for that person. And so when you're being that outward, it's not soft. It's just a way of being that allows you to see the person versus the object.
What's interesting about that story, so you have onlookers making calls, right? Okay, and so they see a situation. This guy's got his arm and he's insisting, obviously, on talking to the player. Yeah, but he probably can't hear anything, right? So there's an inference taking place. They're inferring what's being said based upon notions that they have, based upon what that equates to, right? So their whole brain is processing through and extrapolating and saying this must be what's going on. He can't, be abusive. That's where it goes, right? Then the story of the player coming back goes, Yeah, no, it wasn't. This is what I wanted, right?
Yep.
Because you don't know if that yelling and that screaming, he wasn't saying, "Listen, you are better than what you believe you are, and you can do better than what you're doing because that's who you actually are."
Yep.
You know, you've got it in your head that you can't do this or that you're less than or that somehow this guy's better than you. That's going to alter your behavior. That is not true. And I want you to understand. He's got his arm and he's screaming this into him, right? To penetrate through the automatic system to get to the intentional system to receive it, right? I mean, that's likely what happened.
Yep.
You know, you don't
The
know,
evidence
right?
that people are looking for.
Right.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. And what is their programming?
Right.
And what do they see when they see this angry guy yelling? What are they interpreting that as?
Yeah, and what you said too, this is a really important part. When we talk about this work, we get in, we start diving through piece and apartment. Inevitably they'll go, but okay, so what? I'm not gonna perform anymore. What
No.
is it? Just
Yeah.
it's negative or what? It's like no, and I get that you're confused by this because that's all you've known. So your programs are literally telling you, watch out for this, be careful. He's telling you that it's not important to work, it's not important to succeed, and blah 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 blah. Right? That's literally the programs wanting to stay alive. They really are like personas.
Yeah.
They even have
Mhm.
justification data packets within
Right.
them that they're going to play if there's a threat to the program being shut down. It's absolutely stunning. But what we say is like, no, listen, look at the pattern. We're just flipping the pattern. You go from do have be and do being the primary cause to achieve identity to already having the identity, releasing yourself from the bonds and the dependencies upon these outside sources to define you. You're already defined. You don't need that. You're now more empowered, right? So now you're going to take that and you're going to go perform and you're going to do your best because why? Because I want to.
Right. I get to.
I get
I
to.
get
Yeah, I
to.
get to. I want to. And I feel good when I perform. Does it define me? No. It's one of the things I do. Yeah, it's one of the things I do. But this is who I really am. And this all this value and love that I have is more than anything I could do out here. Right? It's a complete it's all in the brain. It's also called mindfulness. It's called about your thinking. And it's literally what do you stand under? Your understanding. What do you stand under in how you operate, right? It's everything. Because if I go into your brain and I put a lesion on a couple of regions, within that brain, you wouldn't give a rip about anything.
Yep.
Somebody could come up to you and just tell you this, that, and the other thing. You just look at them, the wind would blow, and you just go, "Oh, really? Okay," and off you go. There'd be no sensitization whatsoever. Right? So it's an indication. The world is a stage. These are, it's like it's what you're making it mean, every
Yep.
bit of it.
Yep.
Now, if somebody's got a gun to your head, yeah, there's
That's a threat.
consequence there. That's a threat. You're going to deal with that, but you're going to deal with that in a way you've been trained, quite honestly. So it's not to say that there's not existential threats out there that we have to deal with, but even then, would you rather be as close to your intentional brain
Hmm.
versus just pure automatic? I mean, you want to have that, good training and good intention going on here. The only way to do that is to be responsible for what's being programmed.
Yeah. I absolutely love this talk. I could sit and like have these conversations all day. It's um yeah. So it's how you can change like here's a good example and like people think it's work, like it's work to go and like do this, like even being outward in that sense, right? And I had this was I was on my way to work one day several years ago, and I stopped at Panera to grab a coffee, and there was a line, and I was watching this young man who was behind the counter greet greet would be a polite word, every customer and just his reactions, and you could tell this guy was having a bad morning. Like, he was frustrated, he was rude to everybody, and I'm watching it, and there's a long line, so I'm like, I made this commitment, like, I'm gonna make this guy's day. Like, right, I'm gonna, like, turn this guy's day around, like, this is what I do. I'm gonna give him the energy, like, help him flip it around, and I get up there to order my coffee, and I'm like, "How's it going?" He's like, "Okay." I'm like, "Okay." And he yawns. I'm like, "Oh man, they're not hopping you up on enough caffeine," like making my corny dad jokes and that kind of thing. Everybody else is laughing. This guy unaffected. Then I order a large coffee, and he comes out and he gives me a small coffee, and I'm like, "Man, this guy's gonna hate me." I'm like, I need a little bit more coffee than that. I swear I ordered a large, but all good. I'm like, if you could just switch me out, I'll pay the difference and stuff like that. The guy's like, I'm like, "Oh, definitely not winning this situation." Like, he's so mad. So he's like, pushing the buttons for a while, and he's like trying to figure it out, and now he's frustrated. He can't figure out how to refund me and like do the thing. And so he goes back and talks to his manager, and he comes back and he's like, they said just take the large cup. And I'm like, thank you so much for doing that. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I saw what you did there. I'm like, I know this is frustrating and my mistake, but I saw that you went back to bat for me and you got this done for me. You're done. Made sure you got the large. And I just really want to say I appreciate it. And I took a $5 bill and I gave it to him. All of a sudden, this guy's like, well, thank you. Like all of a sudden I projected on him that he was being very helpful and it changed and gave him a $5 bill. And all of a sudden he was like, just to change his whole entire attitude. And like I was sitting there at the coffee shop for a while. I'm like watching him. And just again, he was, and then I don't want to say maybe he's just having a bad day, but every day I went in there, like I'd stop in there regularly and he was constantly in a better, good mood. It was like he was shaken out of that. I don't want to say I changed him at all, but it's just a matter of like what you can do. So I left that coffee shop and it was like the power of a smile, the power of seeing somebody, the power of being like mindfulness of like, I'm not just going to go through the motions and see this guy in a bad day and like get my coffee and bark at him for giving me the wrong thing and like making his day worse and making my day worse because I'm pissed off at the guy that just messed up my coffee order. And so now I'm just that negative impact. Now it's like, wow, that power of just being able to be present, pour some energy into this guy, and it made this impact for him, made a positive impact for me. I put it out on social media and I threw out a challenge to everybody and was like, make somebody's day today. Like we have the power to like smile and say,
Yes.
wow, you look great today.
Yeah.
In we're walking through and nobody's noticing us so many times. And especially if you're the gas station attendant or someone at Starbucks or just anybody, like just walking by somebody being present and smiling versus being in our phone and not even noticing who's walking by us. And so I threw this challenge out and I was like, go out there and let me know what happens through the day, right? And I was getting so much feedback and my mom, love my mom, very negative programmed, has a lot of things happen and she's not like, anyways, she was like, "Wow, I went out, me and your grandma, we were doing this all day." She was like, "It's unbelievable." She was like, "People are giving a people was like reporting these things of like the spot." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Because I'm impacting my mom and she's seeing like the positives that can happen when you go out and you put a smile on your face versus the see, I told you this is the way people are. Like the like acting a certain way and then feeling like, oh, this is the way people are because you're projecting that. And so what happens when you flip that around? And it's so cool because like I posted all day, like just them, going into the next restaurant and like telling this waitress she's the best waitress we've ever had. And she gives us this note and like gives a free appetizer. It's just really cool. It's not about going and getting free things.
No.
It's just a matter of like making a difference, being a difference maker. It doesn't take much to make a difference.
You know
No.
how many people are out there? I mean, this society too, especially. There's so much anxiety and fear people live in. Just it's the way it is, and there's dejection in that, right? And they feel unnoticed, unheard, insignificant, right? And they'll focus on that, and that's the rumination, right? So you're ruminating. The program is running, and you ruminate on that. What you did was you created a program interrupt. Right? You couldn't help but see you, right? And even though it seemed to degenerate because of the extra work he had to go through to accomplish the goal, what you created in that space is you created acknowledgement of him, affirmation, right? Because think of it, people want to be seen. They just want
Yeah.
to be seen. They want to be, and when we're in the box, right? Back to that book, Leadership, Self-Defense. When you're in the box, you're inward mindset. You're seeing people as objects,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yep.
either objects, tools, obstacles, whatever. They're not human. It's not until you're present and outside of the box that you actually see them as human, right?
Yep.
And then to treat them as a human with dignity. Because guess what? If you see value in yourself, right? Your own worth and identity and so forth, there's tremendous value there. Guess how you're probably gonna see other people, right? As value carriers, they're valuable just for who they are. That is going to come out in how you project, how you be, right? You're going to be welcoming and loving and caring and curious and all these good positive ways of being are going to happen. And then and the other person, you're not making them be happy, you're not doing
Yeah.
that, but they can't help it because they're in the presence and the power of that positive confident energy coming at them. They have to respond, and then you're building them up, right? You're not demanding be happy,
Yeah.
but you're building them up, and they're like probably haven't been built up in who knows how long, right? You were sharing with us about a state of
Yeah.
being, and Danette noticed some words that you said about serving.
Yeah, curious. Your curiosity, the reason you're curious is listening for how you could serve them.
Yes.
Is so huge.
And
It
that's
goes
another way of being,
right.
coupled with the curious. So you were being loving, and you were being giving, right? Generous.
Goes back to what John said earlier about, love your neighbor as yourself, right? To be curious tells me that you're confident in your own skin, right? And loving the neighbor is like that servanthood.
And I think that being curious from the beginning, one thing I think is having an insecurity for my like with myself that I would shift and I'd want to know about other people. I think that's
Mhm.
really where it started. However, then I grew into myself and got confident and all that kind of stuff. And that curiosity was still there. And, I think that, but I think that it was more or less like, how can I get people talking,
Yeah.
especially in a sales standpoint?
Well, yeah, which is a thing, right, in sales that you want them to be talking most.
Yeah.
But it's an important insight to see that, yeah, okay, I use this as a tactic to avoid, right, exposing myself and, just that fear of like, what if they see me? What if they know really me, who I am? Let me shift it and put the attention on to them and they can talk and everything will be good.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
They won't see me.
They
They won't
won't
see
see me.
me. They can't see me. And it's amazing actually that how well, if you think about one of the greatest fears that people have, and it's actually above dying, is a fear of public speaking,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, and okay, you can ask the question, well, why? Well, it's I gotta look good. I have to avoid looking bad. I gotta be right. I can't be wrong. What if I say something wrong? What if I'm not accurate? What if somebody judges me? What if they blah, 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 blah. What if they really see me? Because a lot of people, especially and effective and intelligent people, have that notion of the imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
right? Which is actually a good thing because you know that you don't know it all. The bad thing is when you think you know it all and you've got it all figured out. Yeah, that's actually more of a challenge. But nonetheless, it feeds on our insecurities, right? That we if the more we look into it, we can realize the truth of, yeah, there's so much to learn out there. Yeah, I don't know it all, but I do know some things, right? And I'm leveraging these and I feel good about myself enough that I can be out there. If somebody wants to not like me, they don't like me, right? If they, do I like that? No, right? I like people to like me, right? And you can be honest about that too, but it
Yep.
doesn't crush you. It doesn't, because you separate into two contexts. That of performance is a separate paradigm than that of your worth and self, right? Separate completely.
So huge. One last thing to end
Uh,
it on is thinking about and like, how this all ties into to just even that performance is thinking about that guy that like he goes from going through a divorce to all of a sudden him and his wife are having fun together,
yeah.
and you're talking about like a lot of times we're focusing on, oh, I'm gonna work on my physical self. Like I'm gonna work on my business self or my relationship. We're taking it and we're chunking it out as individual things, and it's us. Period. We're all combined, and when something like our relationship goes to that next level, and all of a sudden we have a love for life, and we're doing these things and we're making it happy. How do we show up in the world? How do we show up at work?
Yeah, how do we show up? Well, that's a loaded question. So it depends on what you create, right?
Yeah.
So if
Yep.
you go to work on yourself, right, and you really get what's the word I want? Settled, right, on the truth. Because here's where we live. We tend to live in distortion, in noise, right? And we live in that subjective reality, right? The things we've concocted on how we view and interpret the world, how the meaning we make about everything, the interpretations and so forth. And the more we're in there, we are not perfect people, right? So guess what's going to be baked into all that? A lot of
Hmm.
noise, a lot of distortion, a lot of untruth. The more so the longer we stay in there, the longer we stay in that distortion. When we get outside and present and deal with reality, what's so? Just what's so? What's the truth of the situation? Who am I being right now, really? I'm being a real jerk. Okay, I'm being a jerk. Do I want to be a jerk? If the answer is no, say, okay, Why am I being a jerk? Ask the question why. Why? What's my driving factor? Am I having a feel like I'm having a bad day? Do I feel why am I doing this? So if we just start, because now you're thinking about your thinking. There's actually a small percentage of the population that actually do that, where you step out of the program, use your intentional part of your brain, and you literally think about, who am I being right now? And it's powerful because when you're there, you can think and you can create.
Yes.
But when you're in the automatic system and you're just kind of reacting and doing what you've always done, no, that's not going to happen.
Groundhog Day.
It's
It's Groundhog Day.
yeah, it's very limiting, and you're just going to keep, trying something different or doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result for some reason, which is, of course, the definition of insanity, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you don't want change because we distinguish between change and transformation. Change is more, better, different. The core thing is still there; it's still the same. When you transform, it's something completely new, right? It's a totally new view, new perspective, new everything, right? So that you're not just getting the same version of something, just tweaked slightly. And unfortunately, in a lot of like counseling or therapy sessions, there's a lot of focus on the symptoms, the behaviors, maybe the cognition, how you're thinking about it. Well, you just got to think about it differently. You're going to focus over here. But if you don't get to that core, it's just this driver is always going to produce what it's always produced. So how do you show up? Well, when you really see your true value, you're going to show up as really you, the real you, right? And feel good about it. And guess what? It's not just in one context. It's every context in your life. That is the live a life of freedom part of it. The freedom to be you, fully self-expressed, right? And joyful with that. Doesn't mean you don't go through bad times or hard times or tough times, but how you deal with it is completely different.
I had this client once and it made me think of this because you think about like especially being in sales, there was a lot of like, oh, I'm a chameleon. I can, like them, or I can, kind of like join this group of friends. I had this client that when he was in high school, he was a state champion wrestler and he played on the football team and so he had this persona and inside this guy was very artistic in mindfulness and like sweet kid, a sweet guy and all this different stuff. And he continued hanging out with his friends from high school. And he would come and he'd talk about, I am so miserable.
Mm.
I feel like my life has no worth. I'm just wasting time. I'm just doing this thing. And as we got into it, it was because he was hanging around this group of friends. And as we got deeper and deeper, it's because we're hanging around these group of friends and they expect him to be like Nick from high school. And they don't know that he's morphed into this and he's trying to be his true self. But he can't be his true self with them because, oh my God, what if they don't like me? What if they don't like me if I'm my true self? And so he's spending all this energy being somebody else, being this person they want him to be.
Yeah.
And he's hanging out with them every day. And he's like, I'm exhausted and I don't want to be there. And I'm like, so be yourself. He's like, well, what if they don't like me? I'm like, you don't want to be there anyways. Like, if they don't like you for you being you, what does it matter? Like
Yeah, what do you have really?
you're now blessed and released. You now don't have to go and hang out with them every day if really bring you down. Now, what if they're like, oh wow, Nick, we didn't know. And now you build closer friendships. You never know.
Right.
Yeah, you have no control over that.
No control.
So then that's another part of the distinction too, is that you have no control over a lot of what you try to control. Right? And that was an example of him.
The more you try to control it, the worse it gets.
Absolutely, because it's uncontrollable. Yeah, and then you set up a false expectation that you can control it, that it's gonna it should come out this way. The shouldas, shoulda, woulda, coulda. The shouldas come out this way. So you set an expectation, which is a mindset, and you don't hit it. And now you're discouraged, you're frustrated, you're mad, you're angry, and you may have even projected that onto somebody, that expectation, that this is what's gonna happen. You have zero control, right? So you set yourself up for failure right away, right?
Yep.
When you do, maybe you'll get lucky and it'll go the way you wanted it to, but it's not because of you necessarily.
It's
right?
not purposeful. It's not intentional.
No, no. So coming to the truth of the current situation is really, really important. W- What's truth? And so we were talking before about distortion, falling into that area of distortion and so forth. The whole goal is to really move from distortion and noise to truth and signal, right? Hearing the signal, seeing the signal away from the noise, and the only way to do that is you got to do, work on this and use the intentional part of your brain and focus on the signal and push out the noise. And that takes something, that takes work. to program and habituate that, right? But it can happen. The brain, there's a misnomer that people think that the brain gets fixed. I'm older. My brain's fixed. Well, if your brain got fixed, you'd be dead because it can't fix because of the nature of how it functions. You'd literally be dead because it's constantly, neurogenesis, creating new neural cells themselves. There's new constructs being formed. If you don't, if your brain's fixed, you're not learning anything because to learn something requires what's called long-term potentiation, which requires new neural connections and which requires new neurons, right? There needs to be plasticity within the construct in order to make that alteration. So the brain is very plastic uh, in that sense, and then which is a very good thing. So that it doesn't matter your situation, what you've learned, what you program, you can alter it. It doesn't matter the age you're at.
Yeah.
It's just you might have some strong, strong programs if you've been on this earth for a while, right? And it's going to take something to overcome the others, but you can if you live in your intentional. If you train the intentional part of your brain to be more predominant than the automated system, then you can, because that's where your programming takes place, is from your prefrontal cortex, medial prefrontal cortex, orbital, and all these regions work together as the executive control center, right? But our culture, our upbringing, our practices, what we rehearse, we like to put it on cruise control and we live from there, and if you choose to do that, then yeah, it's really challenging. You got to learn how to stop the program, step out of it, stop it.
That's the mic drop moment. That's phenomenal. We could sit and tell stories all day. I've got one after another, but thank you guys. Thank you both so much for coming out and jamming with me here. This has been awesome.
Loved it.
I appreciate you very much. I'm so glad we're friends.
I'm so glad that I was hanging out at the Howell Chamber and I got a chance to.
Howell Chamber, they're amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So shout out to them.
It's great to be with people like you that are making a difference, doing good work, and our work aligns, right? You work in a specialty area, but we're totally aligned in the constructs and, how that transformation really takes place within a human.
Yeah, so stay tuned, people, because we're going to be creating some stuff together.
It's fun because I'm in awe because I feel like I impress people when I say reticular activating system and nobody knows what it is. And then you're like, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love this talk. This is great.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good relatability, but yeah. So I don't know. People can get a hold of us through our website.
Yeah. Yes, awesome. And I will put everything in the show notes. So everything, if you want to get a hold of John and Danette, it will be in the show notes. Click the links and contact them.
All right. Well, thanks again. It was wonderful.
Pleasure is all mine.
Love talking about this stuff. So the one thing I wanted to leave with your listeners is a blessing. And it's a blessing of identity. And so those who are believers, who are Christian, this could be very, very helpful. And even for those who are not, it may be it may resonate with them, with you, to encourage you to dig deeper in an understanding of what that authority is that actually bestows the true identity. But it's a blessing. You can read over your children, you can read it to a spouse or whatever, and I'll encourage us, and it hits the identity blessing action. So I'll read it to you, Jason, so I want you to receive this. Okay? All right. So Jason, you are a beloved child of God, made on purpose, full of light, truth, and wonder. You carry the image of the one who made the stars. I bless the way you think, the way you feel, the way you see the world. I bless your mind to be clear, your heart to be strong, and your spirit to stay close to Jesus. You were made to bring love where there's fear, truth where there's confusion, and kindness where there's hurt. Today, you get to shine bright and walk in joy because that's who you are.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's phenomenal. I'm going to add it into the show notes too. That's phenomenal.
It is.
I felt that.
Did you? Yeah. Well, speaking truth, right? Yeah. It's powerful stuff. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. It's resonation, by the way. So when you feel, if those words, hit your audience members, that what you're feeling is like a tuning fork's resonating frequency. It'll resonate another tuning fork tuned to that. Well, that's the way the spirit works within us, is when truth is near or upon us, right? Our spirit resonates with God's spirit, resonates with that truth. And that means that we're in alignment with that. when you feel depressed, when you feel down, when you have those negative feelings, what's happened is we move away from truth and into distortion, noise, right? Lack of signal. It's hard to hear signal in that. And one of the tactics is to, when you find yourself in that position, is to do a realignment and get back into alignment with truth, so that the cloud goes away, the confusion and so forth. Clarity comes back and you hear signal now, right?
I know we were meant to redo this just for that.